Okay, so the seven revolutions in Europe. So the past of the European Union economics. So some of the causes of the debt crisis and their weak economy. So there was the Stability and Growth Pact. There was basically a set of rules that the members of the European Union had to follow. What happened with Greece was that Greece didn't follow the rules of keeping the budget deficits under 3% of their nation's GDP. So they lied and said that it was only 3.7, which is manageable but still high. But in reality, it was 12.7%, which is four times what they said and is significant for the EU, and it's hard for the EU to absorb, which is where a large amount of the problems come from. What Greece did is basically a drain that's being created on countries like Germany who are better financially. So, how important is the European economy? Besides the fact that the European economy in actual size is gigantic and has a huge percentage of the people in our world inside of it, large parts of the world depend on the European economy succeeding. Trading and for other reasons, the European economy matters because of its size. So, the US banks, for instance, hold credit default swaps on European debt, which means that when Europe does poorly, the US is affected. Also, many Asian countries would suffer because the European countries finance their debt. So what Europe is doing for Greece, they used to do for Asia. And if the Europe fails, then they're not going to be able to do this. And then in addition, the problems with Asian countries, specifically China, is that China trades with Europe a lot. If they don't have this trading partner, China is going to suffer because they won't have the trade. So the issues of the euro debt, overall, it's the theme where the problems with the smaller countries hurt the larger and more powerful countries. Once again, the Germany and Greece scenario, or Italy or in Spain, those are all lesser. Germany, with their fiscal policies, is being responsible, and the other countries are being a detriment because they aren't being as responsible as Germany is being. They don't have the same policies, they don't seem to care as much. They're giving their workers longer or shorter work weeks, more breaks, more money for doing less, which is hurting Germany because Germany can't control their government. So Germany can't go into Greece and say this is how you have to treat your workers because they have the same currency but not the same government, which is talked about later with the current issues. So then what steps were being taken to solve some of the problems that were from the past? So the ECB introduced a 2-year program which is supposed to help nationalize loans to households and businesses, and it's basically a desperate effort to buy time. So another thing the ECB is doing is they're bailing out Greece and Italy and Spain, and there have been 2 Greece bailouts so far, and they're trying to buy time for Greece and for the EU overall to focus on other issues and to give them money temporarily basically for these other issues, because the problems that are happening in Greece haven't stopped happening, so they're still being irresponsible. So in theory, Greece would continue to have the debt issues and it would just get worse and worse and worse. But the ECB is trying to come in and say, okay, we're going to prevent that from happening. We're going to let that happen a little bit slower so then they can maybe fix these problems before they get so bad that they can't be bailed out anymore by the EU. So some of the current issues. So just a little elucidation on the Eurozone and the EU. The Eurozone is the countries who use the euro, the currency, and then the EU is the organization, but not a government. The EU manages the euro. Some of the pros for this is the trade ease that's happening between country to country in Europe that is happening now that wasn't happening before. It's easier and it's better to have more of this trading. So it's overall helping them. Another issue that's just an added bonus is that now there's a common goal with countries. So one country that has a better economy isn't competing with the neighboring country, because if they both have a good economy or if one has a good economy, it helps the other one, as they all want the euro to be better. They're all trying to have the economies of each other be good, which is just a common goal, and there's not this competition that they used to have. So then a smaller issue, but there's a travel convenience, so it's easier with currency to all be the same, to go from Spain to Italy to France than it used to be when you would have to change your currency each country that you went to. Also, governments like Greece that are in a bad situation. So Greece is a pro. Greece has a pro coming to it, but it's a detriment to the other countries. But other countries like Greece, so Italy, Spain, they would be in a worse situation than they are now if they didn't have this financial aid from being in the European Union. So basically they're getting these bailouts, which is helping Greece. And then overall, the EU is able to compete with China and the US as a whole when they couldn't before. So France and Germany couldn't necessarily compete with the US and as China and Russia, the bigger powers when they were individual countries, but with the all of their neighboring countries combined, they're stronger. So in some of the cons, and this is a general theme, is that they all have the same currency but not the same government. So a government like Germany that is responsible and that has taken care of their economy has this huge detriment of all of the other countries that are not doing this. So Greece, Italy, Spain, and basically the pigs, because they can't go into Greece once again. They can't go into the countries that are in the pigs and say, this is how you should be running your country. This is how we ended up with success. You need to do this too, because they're not the same government. And the EU is really the only place that has the same currency but not the same government, which is why these problems don't really have easy solutions, because they've never had to be addressed before. And this is a major problem that's happening, is the same currency but not the same government. So then problems with Russia. So the main problem that they have is the gas prices. A petrodictator doesn't do well when the price of oil and petroleum is low, because they depend so heavily on it. So right now, gas prices are quite low, and it dropped to under $50 a barrel, which is significant, which hurts their economy overall. And then their economy is suffering, and because of the economic sanctions from Crimea and shooting down the commercial Malaysian plane, which is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, was the commercial plane. That's when everyone finally said, you know, what they're doing isn't okay. Before, when they were in Crimea, they were in Ukraine, everyone disagreed with it, but nothing was really happening. The sanctions came once they shot down the Malaysian plane. That was a commercial plane, which is why it matters. Anyhow, so they can't borrow money to help out their debts, because what the sanctions that the US put on them says is that Russia can't borrow money from any world bank. So they have a low economy and they can't borrow money to lessen this strain, which means the strain just gets worse. And then because of this, there was a mass exodus of Russian money. So basically what happened is everyone went and wanted to change their money from the ruble to the dollar or to the euro, to a different currency, or just to take their money out of the ruble, because the ruble was dropping in value. So if my money is worth $10 million today and it's going to be worth 10 million rubles today and then 7 million rubles tomorrow, but if I convert it into dollars today, maybe it'll be worth $7 million today and $7 million tomorrow, there's no 3 million ruble drop that there would have been. So everyone had this mass exodus of the Russian money, which then made the value of the ruble go down more significantly than it was before. So this affected it overall. Okay, so some of the possible things that could happen in the future, and these are all plausible things that could happen, but I mean obviously aren't necessarily going to, because it is the future. One of the main things that a lot of people have been skepticizing about or saying could happen is a revolution. So that's the first bullet point. It's explained there is, okay, so this is the future, and these are some plausible things that could happen. And one of the main ideas that people have is that if the problems continue to happen, then it will lead to revolution, which is explained in the first bullet point there. So it talks about how Germany is going to continuously bail out the members of the Eurozone that have rejected austerity and insist on living beyond their means. But then the Germans would basically say no because of the things there. They wouldn't want to give up the sacrifice. They don't really have a reason why Germany is responsible for these other countries. And then also there's a possible recession in Germany. Germany has a strong economy, but if they have to have these other economies dragging them down and the other countries dragging them down, then Germany isn't going to have as strong as an economy anymore. So then the disaster that would happen is that the major banks of Europe would bail out and continue to bail out the countries like Portugal, Italy, Spain, Greece, and these countries would need a huge financial help to stay afloat. So what they're doing right now isn't trying to keep the country afloat for the long run. What they're trying to do is to delay the country's falling under. So the hope is that they're going to delay this and with enough time for the countries to solve their problems without having to worry about the economic issues on top of that. And then they'll be able to help solve their problems with the money that they have, as opposed to not having any money because of the financial problems, which is what the ECB is doing. So in the future, this could be detrimental, because if they don't solve their problems now, then the countries won't be able to solve, the ECB doesn't have that much money. They can't completely bail out the countries. They can only delay it. So if Germany pulls out of the EU, the euro will collapse. So Germany is the strongest economy that the EU has, and the bond yields will skyrocket. So the yields are basically the interest on the bonds. And if there's less stability in the EU, the yields will go up because there's less of a chance that they're going to be able to pay their money back, which means that the yields will have to be higher. But then it hurts the countries more because then the countries that already had high yields are even higher, which means that you have to pay back even more money than you lent out in that you took in the first place. So it's even harder to pay back the debts that you have. And then this would lead to a revolution. It talks about it there, the labor disputes, the strikes, Greece, and then it would just lead to a revolution. The main issue with Greece is that the people feel entitled to the good work week and the good breaks and the good wage. And if you take this away from them, a lot of people think that a revolution will happen because they're like, well, wait a minute, now we don't have this anymore. Why? So even though their economy is struggling, they still don't have fiscal reforms that Germany has, and they're not changing a lot. So if they don't, or if they do change this all at once, a lot of people think that Greece will turn to revolution. And then it also goes on to talk about two other plausible scenarios, but are less popular. At the end, it talks about quantitative easing, which is basically the government trying to artificially stimulate the economy, or not artificially, but trying to stimulate the economy through things like roads. So at the end, it talks about quantitative easing, which is the government trying to stimulate the economy. So roads are an example of this. If the government pays people to build roads, then you're giving money to these people, you're hiring these people, creating jobs, which means these people now have money to go and buy things or money to spend, which stimulates the economy. And then it just talks about the pros and cons of this at the bottom on the left.